Hello. Hey, ladies. I am excited to be on here live with you again. This is Gayla Grace with Family Life Blended. And we are going to be talking all things about women in blended families. And we'll give others just a little bit of time to come on. But while we're doing that, I'm going to introduce a guest that's going to be with me today. Cheryl Shumake is joining me live also. Cheryl's joining from Detroit, Michigan, and we're going to enjoy having her. Hey, Cheryl, good to see you.
Hi, Gayla. Good to see you as well as always.
Well, you have been on here before, so I know that our viewers recognize your face, and we're just excited to have you join in for another conversation. And so while we're waiting for women to come on, I just want to chat with you a minute about the
Sure.
weather because, I'm always interested in y'all's weather up there because we don't get the kind of weather you get.
Yeah, I don't know why you're interested. Nobody wants to be here during this time of year.
I know you've had snow again recently, right?
Yes, so we had a big storm that hit a couple of weeks ago, and then a week after that, we had another storm that
Oh
hit that
my.
brought maybe about 4 or 5 inches of snow. And then we had snow this past weekend that brought another 2 inches, I think, but that's already gone. I mean, this is Michigan, so we kind of say it'll snow in the morning, it's hot in the evening, and who knows what you're going to get at night. So,
Oh,
yeah,
wow. Well,
we're used to it.
I hope you're finished with snow, though. I think I'd be tired of snow by this time of year. No, you're
No,
not?
no. I think I was telling you before that I coached track years
Yes.
ago, and
Mm-hmm.
I was at the state meet in June many, many years ago, and it actually snowed that first weekend in June. So we don't know. We do not put up our winter things until May, at least until May.
Yeah, that is just so foreign to us. In Arkansas, we have our shorts out in May most of the time. So,
Hmm.
yeah. Well, that is one of the things that we're going to talk about today is just the beginning of spring because the first day of spring is just around the corner, even if your weather doesn't tell you that it is. But
Right.
I love spring. It's a great season. I think it signifies new beginnings. And that is one thing that we want to talk about because I feel like that in blended families, new beginnings are something that we just cherish. We want to embrace that because sometimes we get in kind of a little bit of a lull or maybe there's dissension in our home and we want to consider how we get into a new beginning. But Cheryl, just like with the weather, sometimes, at least in the South, we start to get warm, which is what has happened here. Just last week, we were, I think, up into the 70s, some beautiful days. But then last night, we were into the 20s. So
Hmm.
very cold. And I think that sometimes in step family relationships, something like that can happen. We can begin to feel that our relationships are getting warmer and people are beginning to accept us a little bit. And we think we've reached a good trajectory. And then we can go backwards. And all of a sudden, relationships feel cold and prickly. And we're just a little off put about how did this happen? Have we done something wrong here? And I'm just curious your take on that. You've been in a blended family now. You and Jonathan have been married almost 15 years.
Yes,
And
yes.
so you've walked this journey a while. You've got a biological child and 3 stepchildren, and through your ministry, Stepmom Sanity, I know that you understand this journey. So I'm just curious your thoughts on taking one step forward and 2 steps backwards. I bet you've experienced that.
I absolutely have. I'm very familiar with that dance step. And what a great analogy
Mm,
to kind of compare the changing and the instability of spring, especially early spring,
right.
to what happens in our blended families. I absolutely agree. I think that a part of our that whole dichotomy is that we don't know what to expect, right? And
Hmm.
so we have to be prepared for anything, much like the
Right.
weather, if we want to just kind of stretch that analogy out a little bit.
Right. Hmm.
We we need to have our winter coats prepared, sitting right next to our spring jackets, and just be flexible enough to kind of go with
Hmm.
whatever the temperature in the room is. I think for stepmoms, one of the things that I learned was how to read the room really
Oh,
well.
yes.
Yeah, it
Hmm.
it became imperative for me navigating through those warm and cold seasons.
Right, right. Yeah, and I think that we can't get caught up in pining for our relationships to be in a different place than where they're at. I think that if we can learn to find contentment with where we're at today, continue to invest in our relationships and know that there is going to be a payoff to that. But in the meantime, accepting where we're at today. And that is hard. I'm sure that you have walked through some of that too. And I'm just curious what tips that you could give in regards to how do we find contentment when we really want our relationships to be in a different place?
Sure, what a great question. I think one of the first things that we need to do is take the pressure off the relationship to meet some needs, some emotional
Yeah,
needs that we may have, and kind of look
right.
to the Lord to meet those needs. I think that would be one of the first things that I would do. I would also, though, wait in expectation as
Oh,
well.
yes, I love that. Yeah.
Right, just
Mhm.
pray and trust that God is moving in the hearts of the people around you, and
Mhm.
that what and in your heart as well, and so one of 2 things will happen, even if you don't see a change in the other person, you'll begin to change, and you'll begin to
Right.
appreciate the smaller things more than you do now, instead of waiting for some big dramatic change in hearts to turn towards you,
Uh-huh.
you just begin to appreciate the little small steps that you make. And I think, like, talking to your spouse or finding a group of friends as well that you can just kind of lay your burden before, say, "Would you pray for me? Because I'm really struggling here in this particular season with my bonus children, with my marriage, with whatever the dynamic is that you happen to be struggling with. I'm really struggling here. I need help. I need grace. I need someone to tell me that it's going to be okay. I know in my head it's going to be okay, but it's a long journey between my head and my heart. And
Exactly.
need
And
someone to
yeah,
help me."
sometimes just being with people who can be a little more objective with us, they
Yes.
know the situations in our life and they can help just tell us some things that are going to help us feel better. But you know what else I've learned, Cheryl, is that sometimes I feel like that God doesn't change our circumstances, perhaps because He's wanting to change us through
Mhm.
those circumstances. And if we want to just rush through them and we want to get those hard seasons behind us, and yet I think so often God has things that He needs to teach us during those seasons. And if we're willing to listen and really check in to see what do I need to learn here instead of just trying to rush through this season.
Right. That I think, Gayla, that is one of the hardest things
Mm.
to
Mm-hmm.
understand about this walk that we have.
Right.
You know, that James really meant it when he said, "Count it all joy when you face various trials," and Peter meant it when he said it as well. That we are brought to these hard, difficult places because God uses those hard, difficult places
Right.
to form us into greater Christ likeness, and that really is the goal of our walk in this earth, to be sanctified, to look more like Jesus, to draw others to Him. But
Right.
it is not easy. The experience of it, the idea of it, when we're reading the Bible, sounds wonderful, and we pray for those opportunities. But then when we begin to experience them, we want relief, and we
I
want it
know.
today.
Yeah. I mean, it's easy to say it and to hear it.
Hmm.
We know what James says.
Hmm.
And I know that adversity teaches us dependence on God, but
Hmm.
it doesn't mean that I want to continue in that season, in those
Right.
situations. And
Right.
I do think that we have to, though, in our walk, just recognize that God is teaching us things and the season won't last forever. We've certainly in our step family had situations that were very, very hard. And I don't
Hmm.
want to go back and repeat those seasons, but at the same
Hmm.
time, I am thankful for the things that God taught me during those times. And Cheryl, you talk about this in your book, Waiting to Be Wanted. You talk
Hmm.
about some of the isolation that you felt and that there was this big chasm between what your expectations of step family life were going to look like and
Hmm.
what they really did look like. And I'm just curious how you dealt with some of that waiting. What did you do to
Hmm.
try to help during that time?
Well, I honestly, first and foremost, did a whole lot of praying because I didn't understand why the expectation wasn't met. There
Mm,
was a great deal of promise during the courting season. There was a great deal of promise, certainly standing at the altar all together.
yes.
But the reality again was something
Mhm.
completely different. So I struggled, of course,
Mhm.
initially, and when I struggle, my typical response is to go to the one who knows the end from the beginning, and it's like, Father, I don't understand this. How do I do this well given the circumstances that I'm dealing with, given the rejection and the misunderstanding and the hurt and the pain and the lack of clarity in terms of my role
Mhm.
in this family? What am I supposed to do? And little by little, it wasn't a one fell swoop. Just little by little, the Lord began showing me just a few things that I can do to tweak, to move, to negotiate with my own emotions, to
Right.
help in
Mhm.
the process, in my own process. So for me, waiting was not so much a passive kind of standing by twiddling my thumbs, but I was very active in the waiting in terms of asking God, okay, how do I show up when this situation has arisen, and how do I respond to this?
Mm,
I was very deliberate about learning new ways of communicating, of understanding what my bonus children were perhaps going through, what my daughter might be experiencing. So learning
right.
empathy became a huge factor in how I learned to wait. So it was not a an exercise in sitting down. It was a really very active process.
Yeah, and I love that, and I think also the position that we take can be one of what I like to say a victim or a victor. Because
Absolutely.
the truth is, there were times as a stepmom for me that I did take the position of feeling a little bit like a victim, that
Mhm.
they had a biological mom in their life that they loved and cared for and didn't need another mom. And so, what in the world was I even doing? And why was I placed in this role? I felt that God had called me into this role as a stepmom, and yet there was so many times I didn't feel needed, and I
Mhm.
questioned what in the world was I doing. And I think, though, that during that time, God really showed me that I didn't have to be a victim. I didn't have to sit there and say, I have no control here. I'll never be happy again. I'll never find happiness in this role. Instead, I could choose to be a victor that said, yes, there are things I can do. There are ways I can continue to pour into my relationship with my stepchildren. And as a result of that, grow these relationships. And so,
Mhm.
so
Mhm.
much of it does depend on the position that we take, the attitude that we choose to take, and the results are going to come in reflection to how we manage our emotions and how we manage our behavior. I'm
Mhm.
just curious if you have had some of those same thoughts on being a victim or a victor in your situation also.
Yes, well, again, early on, I had to make a decision as to whether or not I was going to continue in like you said, in victimhood, in
Mm.
a woe is me, kind of
Right.
wallowing in self-pity a little bit. And I began to attach my role to what God wanted me to do in my family. And that really was to kind of point my children to the Lord. And I could do that whether I was a beloved mother figure or a friend or a persona non grata. I could still be consistent in that. And so that
Right.
became a focus for me. And when that became a focus for me, all of these kind of self-pitying lies from the enemy that I was listening to, that I was wallowing in, just began to kind of fall away.
Hmm.
So it became very even as I still struggled and still dealt with some of the emotions of the impact of behavior that took a back seat to what I was there to do.
Yes.
So changing my perspective, you kind of alluded to that,
Hmm.
asking God, what is your perspective on my role here? And then working to fulfill that, because then I could get my well done and my affirmation and my atta girl and my pats on the back from the Lord. And again, not look to my children to do that for me, which really did a lot for robbing me of victimhood, if you
Hmm.
will.
Hmm.
definitely
Mhm,
became a victor in that way when I can
mhm.
look to him. And I think also learning how to appreciate the relationship, Gayla, for what it was at the time.
Yes. Mhm,
Just saying,
mhm.
"Okay, this is what it is. This is the kind of relationship that I have with this particular child," because I will say this as well. As many children as you have, you will have that many different relationships.
Exactly, right.
You will not have the same relationship with this kid that you do with that one. So just really taking what I did have and
Mhm.
learning how to appreciate it for what it was allowed me to kind of pour into the relationship and it to grow. And it gave me freedom to then give the child space for
Right.
them to determine how they want to be in the relationship as well.
Absolutely. And I think too, just to trust God with where the relationships are and trust
Yes.
God with the dynamics, the circumstances that He has put you in. I wanted to analyze everything. I wanted to understand it and go back to God and say, really? This didn't make any sense to me. So I need you
Right.
to kind of fill me in here. And,
Right.
we don't always get those answers from God, at least perhaps until we're looking backwards.
Now,
And
did you ever like? Because one of the things that I did was I approached God with what I thought my idea was, like, what the resolution is, like, "See, God, if we just do this, or if you
uh-huh.
just do if you do it like that, then this will be a done deal, and we don't have to struggle anymore." But, yeah,
Exactly.
I
Yeah.
I love that. Thank you for that.
Well, I think that God reminded me of the scripture in Isaiah 55 about my ways are higher than your ways. My thoughts are different than your thoughts. And
Yes.
if you'll just trust me, then you will, in the end, understand it in a way that you don't understand it now. But I had to go back to that a lot, Cheryl. And I think there's some
Yes.
daily habits that we have to instill in ourselves. We have to be careful that we're not believing every thought that comes into our head. I mean, I don't know
Mhm.
about you, but sometimes I've got these thoughts in my head and I don't need to sit there and believe them for one thing. I
Right.
need to understand those aren't healthy thoughts. Those thoughts are lies and I can turn those around. And again, that comes to being a victor and not being a victim. So,
Absolutely,
mhm.
absolutely. I think the other thing too is like not to pick your apples before they're ripe. We borrow trouble so very easily when we're in these precarious places and we go
Right.
to the worst scenario possible, right?
Mhm.
And so I have learned how to say, okay, this is what I'm actually dealing with. I am not down the road where my mind is trying to take me. I haven't even picked an apple, much less made an apple pie. So how about I just deal with this one little thing right here and not borrow trouble.
Right. Oh my goodness, exactly. And I'm excited, Cheryl, that you're joining us at Blended and Blessed this year. Our
Praise God.
theme is all about living blessed. We want to live blessed, and sometimes we don't really know what that means or how we get there to live blessed. And so I'm excited to have you join us. Maybe you can even just talk a little bit about what are you going to be talking about at Blended and Blessed.
I actually am going to be talking about the blessing of bonus and what God works in our lives as a result
Mm.
of, not in spite of, but because we are in the bonus role in our families. And I'm excited to explore that with everyone. I'm excited to be there. Feel very honored to be a part of what you all have been doing for the last, is this the 6th year that we're doing Blended and Blessed?
I maybe more than that
Maybe more than
actually.
that. Okay. Well, it
7. Okay.
7th. Okay,
Year
so
number
7th
7.
year. Oh, that's so awesome. So I'm really excited to be a part of that and really to kind of help people that may feel like we have felt in the past and may even sometimes experience today, that we're still doing that one step, two step backwards dance,
Yes. Mhm.
that I can hang in there. I can hang
Mhm.
in there because I will see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living.
Mhm.
Yes.
Absolutely. And I know I've said it before, one of my favorite verses when I was in the trenches of step parenting, Galatians 6:9. Don't grow weary of doing good, because at the proper time you will reap a harvest if you don't give up. And
Right.
we don't know what that proper time is, Cheryl. Sometimes it's longer than we want. I mean, I do know it takes a while to reap benefits, even as a farmer. I mean, it doesn't happen. We got to sow for a while before we reap. And so it's the same thing in our step family relationships. But
Yes, there's
I,
a principle in the Bible that that talks about the Bible talks about seed, time, and harvest, and that is a principle that is not just like you said, not just for farming, but in everything. There is a
Mhm.
seed, but within the seed is the harvest, and we just have to give
Right.
it time.
Right. So I just want to encourage our ladies that during seasons of feeling discouraged or discontent because we want our relationships to be in a different place than they are, that we can trust God, that really He has us just where He wants us to be, and that He will continue to grow us and mature us and grow these relationships if we continue to do our part. And that's what God asks of us. And so
Mhm.
I just am so thankful to have you on with us again, Cheryl. It's always a joy to have you here. And we look forward to seeing you at Blended and Blessed. I will mention it's April the 29th. It's a live event in Melbourne, Florida, and it's a live stream so people can watch it in the comfort of their home. A great way, a premier event for step family couples. And we do hope that you'll join us for that. And then for our next live stream, I just want to remind the viewers, if you keep watching our Family Life Blended page on Facebook or Instagram, we will announce our next live stream will be probably the first week of May. You know, there's so much to talk about as we move towards Mother's Day. And Mother's Day can be a hard day for stepmoms. Cheryl, I bet you can agree with that, right?
Absolutely,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely.
And so we'll come back on to encourage you stepmoms about how to make the best of Mother's Day, even for other moms, even for biological moms. And so just want to be an encouragement to you to provide hope for your journey. So thank you, ladies, for joining us. Keep following us. Come back to see us again. And in the meantime, keep pressing on. You can do this, ladies. Thanks for being here.
Bye.
Bye, Cheryl.